Before we dive in, I've got a quick question for you. Where are you watching from right now, and what time is it? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing how far and wide our viewers are tuning in. Now, imagine this. Rimuru, the calculating, suddenly enters the 7 deadly sins universe. What happens next? Let's find out. The sky above Britannia does not crack gently. It ruptures. Clouds spiral inward as if the atmosphere itself has been hooked and dragged open, sunlight bending around a widening tear that hums with a frequency no mage can identify. Villagers miles away feel their skin prickle. Horses collapse. Holy knights mid-patrol freeze as their detection crystals shatter simultaneously. Magic is not surging. It is being displaced. Something is pushing into the world from the outside. Then he falls. Not crashing, not screaming. Falling with controlled stillness. Rimuru Tempest descends through the rupture in human form, silver blue hair rippling in the distorted air, golden eyes steady, expression almost curious. He does not look threatened. He looks interested. As his feet touch the earth outside a fortified Holy Knight outpost, the grass beneath him bends outward in a perfect circle. Not burned or frozen, but overwritten, as if the land momentarily forgot its original state and accepted a new one. The Holy Knights react instantly. Armor gleams, spears level. Sacred energy ignites along engraved blades. To them, this is obvious. A demon clan elite has just manifested without warning. The captain does not hesitate. A barrage of light-infused lances streaks toward Rimuru, each calibrated to pierce demonic cores. They never reach him. The moment the spells cross a 3-meter radius, they unravel, not deflected, not blocked. The structure of the magic simply collapses, disassembled into harmless particles that spiral inward and vanish. Raphael is already active, parsing the composition of this world's mana, cataloging divine signatures embedded in every spell. Rimuru does not move because he does not need to. Every variable is being solved in real time. The captain shouts for formation shift. A sacred seal activates beneath Rimuru's feet, chains of condensed light snapping upward to bind his limbs. This time, Rimuru glances down, mildly impressed. The system here is layered, authority-based. There are rules baked into the magic itself. Interesting. He allows the chains to close around his wrists. For half a second. Then Predator hums. The chains flicker, their energy siphoned, dissected, understood. The seal beneath him fractures outward in geometric cracks, the Holy Knights stumbling back as feedback lashes through their nervous systems. Several collapsed, coughing blood. Rimuru exhales slowly, not annoyed, not angry, simply aware now that this world is governed by 2 overwhelming presences, one demonic, one divine. The land feels claimed, structured, controlled. A smile touches his face, faint but genuine. High above, in a tavern far from the outpost, Meliodas pauses mid-step. The mug in his hand trembles as a pressure rolls across Britannia like distant thunder. He does not recognize the signature, and that alone is enough to make his eyes sharpen. Back at the shattered seal, the surviving Holy Knights prepare a final charge. Sacred weapons raised, fear masked as duty. Rimuru studies them for a breath longer, then releases a controlled pulse of gluttony into the air, not aimed at their bodies, but at the magic saturating the battlefield. The atmosphere ripples, the holy energy coating their blades gutters out. Defensive enchantments collapse. For the first time in centuries, a Holy Knight stands on a battlefield holding nothing but ordinary steel. And the sky above does not close. It widens. Wind tears across the field as the rupture above expands another fraction, light bending along its edges like glass under pressure. The Holy Knights feel it now, not just as fear, but as absence. The familiar warmth of divine blessing that usually cushions their bodies in battle is thinning, stretched toward the stranger standing calmly at the center of their formation. Rimuru lifts his gaze toward the tear in the sky, sensing resistance from the world itself, like an immune system recognizing an intruder and preparing a response. The captain forces himself upright, pride overriding terror. He roars an order and drives forward, blade igniting with the last of his sacred reserves. The strike is clean, disciplined, meant to cleave through demonic flesh and sever corruption at its root. The blade connects. It stops against Rimuru's shoulder, as if pressed into an invisible wall. There is no explosion of force, no dramatic recoil. Just stillness. Rimuru tilts his head slightly, studying the sword inches from his neck. Raphael completes its analysis. Sacred steel, goddess-aligned, reinforced through ritual prayer and blood oath contracts, effective against demons, ineffective against him. With a small shift of his fingers, space bends. The captain's sword warps sideways, redirected harmlessly into the earth. A shallow trench carves across the field, dust rising in a sharp line that divides the attacker from target. Before the captain can recover, Rimuru steps forward, not fast but precise, and places 2 fingers against the man's breastplate. A pulse of neutralized mana flows through the armor, not destructive, simply disruptive. The enchantments woven into the metal collapse instantly. The captain drops to one knee, breath stolen from his lungs as the reinforcing magic that enhanced his body vanishes. Rimuru withdraws his hand. He could end this. A single thought would suffice, but that would answer nothing. Instead, he expands his perception. Mana veins beneath Britannia's soil light up in his awareness like a map. They are not natural currents. They are structured pathways channeled toward 2 massive focal points far beyond the horizon. One radiates oppressive darkness laced with ancient authority. The other hums with cold, blinding divinity. Demon King, supreme deity. The realization settles cleanly into place. This world is ruled by systems that impose hierarchy. Interesting. The rupture above pulses in response to his growing output. Lightning flickers inside it, not ordinary lightning, but corrective force, as if the sky is attempting to seal the wound through which he arrived. Rimuru senses the mechanism forming an automatic expulsion protocol triggered by foreign existence. He narrows his eyes slightly. He refuses. A thin column of azure energy rises from his body, threading upward into the tear. It is not aggressive. It is anchored. He stabilizes his entry point, rewriting the interference pattern long enough to remain. The pressure that was building to eject him dissipates, redirected, confused. Across Britannia, seers collapse. Magic instruments overload. Demon clan remnants hidden in shadowed valleys snap their heads toward the disturbance. This is not goddess energy, not a demon, not fair, not giant. It is something that does not belong to the recorded history of their war. On the battlefield, the remaining holy knights hesitate. Their training has no chapter for this. Rimuru finally addresses them, voice even, almost polite. He asks a simple question about this land and its rulers. The captain tries to answer but chokes on his own disbelief. To them, he is a catastrophe given form. Rimuru studies their reactions carefully. No lies, only fear and rigid loyalty. He lowers his aura slightly, just enough for them to breathe again, though the grass around him still bends outward in quiet submission. He is confirmed enough to know that open hostility will only accelerate attention from higher authorities. And that is precisely what he wants. Because somewhere in this world, something ancient has already felt him, and it is preparing to respond. Far beneath the surface of Britannia, within a realm where darkness coils like living smoke, a presence stirs. The Demon King does not wake fully, but awareness brushes against the anomaly spreading across his domain. It feels wrong, not hostile in the familiar way of goddess interference, not rebellious like a commandment straying from doctrine. This presence is external, unregistered by the ancient contracts that bind demon blood to law. That alone is enough to send a ripple of irritation through the abyss. At the same moment, high above the mortal plane where divine light gathers beyond the reach of ordinary sight, a fracture of awareness turns downward. The supreme deity senses disruption in the ordained balance. The system she and her counterpart forged to regulate sin, punishment, reincarnation, and authority is experiencing variance. A new variable has entered the equation. Back on the battlefield, Rimuru feels both reactions as faint tremors brushing the edges of his perception. He does not know their full identities yet, but he understands scale. Two apex entities, two poles of control, both tied directly into the fabric of this world's magic. Good. The captain, still kneeling, finally manages to speak through a strained breath. He demands Rimuru's allegiance, invokes the authority of the kingdom, the goddess clan, the sacred order. Rimuru listens without interruption. His expression remains neutral, but internally Raphael is mapping linguistic patterns, political hierarchies, historical markers embedded in the man's words. 7 deadly sins, holy war, commandments, curses. Curses. That word lingers. Rimuru's eyes flicker slightly as he expands analysis toward the horizon. Somewhere far from this outpost, a curse of staggering density coils around two intertwined destinies, looping endlessly through time. The structure of it is intricate, brutal, elegant in its cruelty. A punishment designed not simply to harm, but to enforce eternal recurrence. His interest sharpens. The captain mistakes the silence for hesitation and signals the remaining knights to surround him again. Though their formation is shaky now, one of them whispers a prayer and activates a long-range transmission spell, sending a flare of encoded light toward the capital. Reinforcements are coming. Word will spread quickly that an unknown entity capable of dismantling sacred enchantments has appeared. Rimuru allows the signal to escape. Information accelerates reaction. He takes a single step forward, and the ground beneath him crystallizes momentarily before stabilizing again, unable to decide whether to reject or accept his presence. The knights flinch as his aura rises a fraction, not crushing, but vast. The air thickens with layered computation as Raphael overlays predictive models across the battlefield. Probabilities branch. Interventions from upper tiers become increasingly likely within minutes. He speaks again, this time not to the knights, but almost to the world itself, testing resonance. He releases a thin thread of magic outward, probing the invisible framework that enforces the commandments. It is like touching a grid of laws suspended over reality. Each node hums with authority derived from a singular source. So that is how it is structured. A faint vibration answers his probe. Not an attack yet, a warning. Rimuru smiles softly. In the distance, clouds begin converging unnaturally, spiraling toward the location of the rupture. Dark energy gathers along the edges of the sky, while streaks of holy light descend in counter-formation. The two forces are not cooperating, but they are reacting to the same threat. The holy knights finally understand what they are standing between. One of them drops his weapon entirely. Rimuru turns his gaze upward as twin pressures begin compressing the atmosphere from opposite directions. He has drawn the attention he wanted, not through destruction, not through conquest, but through refusal to submit to predefined law. The tear in the sky stabilizes fully now, anchored by his will. He is no longer a foreign object slipping through a crack. He is a fixed point inside their system. And the system is about to push back. The first sign is not an explosion. It is silent. Birdsong vanishes. Wind stalls mid-current. Even the distant rustle of trees beyond the outpost halts, as if the world itself is holding its breath. The holy knights feel their hearts pound louder in the absence of sound, every pulse echoing in their ears. Then the pressure descends. It comes from below first. A suffocating weight crawls up from the earth, thick with ancient malice and sovereign authority. The soil darkens in thin branching veins around the battlefield, shadows stretching unnaturally toward Rimuru's feet. Demonic energy saturates the ground, testing him, pressing against his aura like a teat trying to reclaim stolen territory. Almost simultaneously, the sky answers. Columns of pale radiance spear downward through the cloud spiral, bathing the field in sterile brilliance. The light does not burn randomly. It searches, it measures, it judges. Where it touches broken sacred seals, they attempt to reconstruct themselves. Where it brushes fallen knights, their vitality flickers back faintly as divine power struggles to reassert dominance. Two opposing forces, neither aimed at each other. Both converge on him. Rimuru closes his eyes for a fraction of a second and expands his perception to its widest range yet. The demonic pressure carries structured will, layered with law enforcement protocols tied to commandments. The divine radiance carries corrective authority, designed to purge anomalies that threaten ordained balance. He is being evaluated from both extremes, weighed against a system that has functioned for millennia without interruption. Raphael's analysis accelerates. Data streams interlocking. This world operates on binary dominance. Demon versus goddess. Sin versus judgment. Authority derived from origin entities who anchor reality through imposed rules. Free variables are not tolerated, which means coexistence without adjustment is impossible. The demonic shadow thickens, rising from the earth in towering silhouettes that do not fully manifest but radiate unmistakable presence. A voice reverberates through the ground, ancient and contemptuous, demanding identification and submission. At the same time, the descending light intensifies, forming a radiant sigil high above the rupture, its geometry attempting to seal the dimensional wound permanently and erase the source of contamination. The holy knights collapse under the cross pressure, armor clattering against stone. Some scream. Others can only stare at Rimuru, realizing they are witnessing forces far beyond their rank. Opens his eyes. Golden irises reflect both darkness and light without distortion. He does not bow to the shadow. He does not kneel before the radiance. Instead, he releases a measured expansion of his aura, not explosive but absolute. Space around him folds subtly, creating a stabilized domain that rejects external overriding. The creeping demonic veins halt at its boundary. The descending holy sigil fractures where it touches his anchored presence. He speaks calm and clear, his voice carrying across both planes. He does not claim dominion. He does not declare war. He states a simple truth. He does not belong to their system. The declaration ripples outward like a shockwave. The demonic authority surges in response, attempting to bind him through conceptual chains tied to sin and loyalty. The divine sigil compresses, trying to categorize him as corruption to be cleansed. Raphael completes a critical calculation. Direct resistance will escalate to full manifestation. So Rimuru shifts strategy. Rather than push back harder, he reaches forward. A thin strand of Beelzebuth extends invisibly into the descending holy construct, not devouring the entire thing, but sampling its informational core. Simultaneously, another thread brushes the demonic authority saturating the earth, extracting fragments of commandment logic. He does not consume recklessly. He learns. Both forces recoil slightly. For the first time since their ancient war began, something has touched their authority without being defined by it. The sky trembles violently as the rupture above stabilizes into a permanent scar across the clouds. The ground stops advancing. The divine light flickers uncertainly. Rimuru stands at the center of a battlefield no longer controlled by either side. Across Britannia, powerful beings feel the shift. Meliodas sets down his drink without smiling. Far away, other sins pause mid-action, sensing that the balance they have lived under is no longer stable. Back at the outpost, the pressure does not disappear. It recalibrates. This is no longer an automatic purge. It is a coming confrontation. And as the twin authorities withdraw just enough to prepare a more deliberate response, one fact settles over Britannia like an approaching storm. A foreign king has entered their world, and he has no intention of kneeling. The air over the shattered outpost has barely stabilized when a new presence cuts through the pressure like a blade through silk. It is not as suffocating as the Demon King's authority, nor as blinding as the descending divine light. It is compact, controlled, dangerous in a way that feels almost casual. A figure steps into view at the edge of the ruined field, short blonde hair tousled by the fading wind, green eyes, calm but razor-sharp beneath an easy expression. He looks almost unimpressed by the fractured earth and collapsed knights around him. Almost. Meliodas has arrived. He surveys the scene in one smooth glance, taking in the cracked seal formations, the warped trench carved through the soil, the unnatural scar still etched across the sky. His gaze settles on Rimuru, and for a brief second neither of them speaks. There is no dramatic announcement, no immediate explosion of killing intent, just an evaluation. Rimuru studies him the same way he studies everything, golden eyes steady, posture relaxed, mind already mapping the density of magic coiled inside the man's compact frame. It is immense but compressed, layered with something older than the battlefield itself. A curse threads through his existence like barbed wire woven into muscle. Interesting. Meliodas breaks the silence first, voice light, almost conversational, as if they are meeting inside a tavern rather than the center of a dimensional incident. He asks who Rimuru is and why half the kingdom's detection network just screamed at once. The tone is friendly. The question is not. Rimuru answers simply, a traveler, an observer, for now. Meliodas' smile does not change, but the air between them tightens. He takes a single step forward, and the ground does not crack under pressure. Instead, it hums, responding to him like a familiar instrument. This is his world, his battlefield. Without warning, he vanishes. The strike comes from Rimuru's blind spot, a precise punch aimed not to test, but to measure durability. It lands squarely against Rimuru's side with force capable of leveling fortifications. The shockwave detonates outward. Dust erupts in a circular blast. The remaining holy knights are thrown backward like rag dolls. Stone fragments lift and scatter across the field. When the debris clears, Rimuru is still standing exactly where he was. His coat flutters slightly. Meliodas is already retreating, boots skidding lightly across the fractured earth as he reassesses. His eyes narrow just a fraction. That punch should have at least moved him. Raphael completes a full kinetic breakdown. Physical output exceeds high-tier demon classification. Energy signature intertwined with curse-based reinforcement. Reaction speed extreme. Rimuru rotates his shoulder once as if loosening tension, then speaks with quiet approval. Impressive. Meliodas laughs softly, and the sound carries no fear. Good. He hates boring fights. This time, he draws his blade. The moment steel clears the sheath, demonic energy floods the air, dark markings crawling across his face as power surges upward without restraint. The pressure spikes so violently that the fractured ground caves in further, forming a shallow crater around him. Rimuru feels it immediately. This is not a probing strike anymore. Meliodas swings. A crescent of condensed demonic force tears across the battlefield, splitting the air itself. It is not pure magic. It is power reinforced by will and centuries of accumulated battle instinct. Rimuru does not dodge. Instead, he raises one hand and releases a concentrated blast of his own magic directly into the incoming wave. The two forces collide head-on. For a heartbeat, the world holds steady. Then Meliodas' eyes flash as he twists his blade. Full counter activates. Rimuru's own attack rebounds instantly, amplified and redirected back toward him at lethal velocity, layered now with demonic enhancement. The holy knights watching from a distance gasp, convinced the stranger has just sealed his fate. But Rimuru is already smiling. The amplified blast hurtles back toward Rimuru with enough force to tear open a canyon, demonic energy braided tightly around his own magic signature. Any ordinary opponent would panic at the realization that their strongest attack had just been turned against them. Rimuru does not. He steps forward into it. At the exact moment the reflected wave is about to make contact, a thin distortion ripples across the space in front of him. Beelzebuth activates with surgical precision, not swallowing the entire attack in one reckless gulp, but filtering it. The demonic amplification layer is stripped away first, analyzed and stored. The original magic beneath it is reclaimed effortlessly. What remains detonates upward in a pillar of harmless light that splits the clouds but leaves the ground intact. Meliodas lands lightly a few meters away, blade resting against his shoulder. His expression has shifted. The relaxed grin is still there, but it no longer carries amusement alone. Now there is focus behind it. "You figured it out fast," he says quietly. Rimuru answers just as calmly. "It is efficient. Reflective reinforcement based on incoming magical composition. However, it requires external input." Meliodas' eyebrow lifts slightly. Most opponents never survive long enough to articulate how full counter functions, let alone dissect it mid-battle. He shifts his stance, testing the weight of the moment. This is no longer a casual assessment. This is recognition. Without another word, he vanishes again, this time accelerating far beyond his previous burst. He appears above Rimuru, blade descending in a vertical arc laced with raw demonic force rather than magic. If reflection will not work, brute force will. The impact splits the ground open. A jagged fissure races outward for dozens of meters, carving through what remains of the outpost walls. Shockwaves ripple across the landscape, flattening nearby trees. The holy knights who have regained consciousness shield their faces as debris rains down around them. At the center of the fracture, Rimuru stands within a compressed sphere of spatial distortion. Meliodas' blade halted inches from his shoulder by warped geometry itself. The air bends around them like glass under pressure. Rimuru tilts his head slightly. Physical output is significantly higher than your magical output. Meliodas pushes harder, muscles tightening, demonic markings spreading further across his skin. The ground beneath his feet crumbles under the strain, but the blade does not advance another millimeter. "Then let's turn it up," he replies. Darkness erupts outward from his body in a violent surge. His power spikes again, no longer restrained, demonic aura flooding the battlefield in waves that shake the sky scar above them. The pressure is heavy enough to make even seasoned knights struggle to breathe. Rimuru feels the escalation and responds in kind, though with far less spectacle. His aura expands smoothly, not explosive, but absolute, meeting the demonic tide with controlled dominance. Where the two energies collide, the air vibrates violently, lightning snapping between black and azure currents. For the first time, Meliodas is forced backward, not thrown, not overwhelmed, pushed. His boots carve twin trenches across the shattered earth, as Rimuru's spatial field expands another meter. The difference is subtle but undeniable. Meliodas laughs, and this time it is genuine excitement. "You're not from around here, are you?" Rimuru's golden eyes narrow slightly as Raphael overlays deeper analysis across Meliodas' curse. The regenerative pattern woven into his existence is abnormal. Even fatal damage would not conclude this battle permanently. The curse would drag him back, over and over. Now the fight becomes truly interesting. Rimuru lowers his spatial barrier deliberately, giving Meliodas room to advance again. An invitation. Meliodas accepts without hesitation. He launches forward again, but this time there is no testing strike, no measured swing. His blade becomes a blur, each movement precise, brutal, layered with centuries of battlefield instinct. He does not rely on raw strength alone now. He mixes feints with explosive bursts of demonic force, alternating between physical cuts and compressed energy blasts designed to force a reaction. Rimuru meets him step for step. Instead of overwhelming him with a single decisive technique, Rimuru mirrors the tempo. His movements are economical, almost minimal. A slight pivot avoids a lethal thrust. 2 fingers redirect a horizontal slash just enough to prevent contact. A compact surge of magic intercepts a point-blank demonic blast before it can expand. Raphael calculates angles and timing faster than thought, feeding him optimal responses without visible strain. Steel clashes against condensed mana. Shockwaves ripple outward in tight pulses rather than uncontrolled explosions. The battlefield turning into a grid of fractured earth and suspended dust. Every exchange refines their understanding of each other. Meliodas notices something first. Rimuru is not merely defending. He is learning. The rhythm of their clash begins to shift subtly. Rimuru adjusts to Meliodas's acceleration bursts more quickly each time. He anticipates the split-second delay before a feint becomes a full commitment. When Meliodas channels demonic power into his blade for another destructive arc, Rimuru steps inside the swing instead of away from it. His palm presses lightly against Meliodas's chest. A compact surge of neutralized energy detonates at point-blank range. Meliodas is launched backward, not with wild force, but with controlled precision, skidding across the broken terrain before flipping upright mid-slide. His boots dig into the earth, halting his momentum in a spray of stone fragments. He touches his chest briefly, then smirks. That's new. Rimuru's expression remains calm, but internally Raphael confirms the data capture. Direct contact has mapped deeper layers of Meliodas's curse. The regenerative anchor is not purely demonic. It is tethered to an external authority, a punishment mechanism designed to prevent true death, which means defeating him in battle will never be enough. Meliodas rolls his shoulders once, and then the air changes again. The demonic aura around him compresses inward, tightening rather than expanding. The playful surface energy vanishes, replaced by something denser. His eyes darken slightly as he draws on power he rarely releases without consequence. The sky scar flickers violently in response. Rimuru feels it immediately. This level of output is not localized. It is linked upward, downward, outward. The more Meliodas drew, the more the ancient authorities observed. "You're holding back," Meliodas says evenly. "I can tell." Rimuru does not deny it. He lifts one hand slowly, azure light condensing along his fingers, not as a reckless blast, but as layered structure. This time he does not fire directly. Instead, he shapes the magic into a narrow beam and releases it toward Meliodas at controlled velocity. Meliodas's grin sharpens. He swings. Full counter activates again, reflecting the beam with amplified demonic charge. But this time the reflected attack behaves differently. Mid-flight, the beam fractures into multiple smaller strands, each shifting trajectory unpredictably. Meliodas's eyes widen slightly. The primary blast returns toward Rimuru, but the fragmented strands curve around the battlefield, striking from blind angles. Meliodas twists to intercept them, blade flashing, cutting through 2, deflecting another. A 4th grazes his side before exploding in a contained burst that sends him sliding backward again. Rimuru absorbs the returning primary beam effortlessly. Adaptation confirmed. Meliodas lowers his blade slowly. Now he understands. This opponent does not simply match strength. He evolves mid-fight. And for the first time since their clash began, Meliodas stops smiling entirely. Meliodas' eyes sharpen. The playful grin gone, replaced by the calculating focus of a warrior who recognizes an equal, or perhaps someone even beyond his usual measurement. The battlefield, already shattered, now quakes under the invisible tension between 2 forces that refuse to yield. Dust spirals endlessly as the residual shockwaves of their exchanges clash with the wind, and the surrounding holy knights cling to what little cover remains, powerless to intervene. Every inch of terrain is warped, fractured, a silent testament to the escalating duel. Rimuru does not advance recklessly. Instead, he narrows his perception, sensing the layers of demonic reinforcement laced throughout Meliodas's being. The curse is intricate, a living system intertwined with regenerative loops and residual energy that would normally require decades of analysis to understand. But Raphael has been active since the first strike, mapping it in real time, calculating weaknesses, predicting counterplay. Rimuru's hand moves almost lazily, a subtle gesture that warps the flow of magic around him. The air bends slightly, barely noticeable, but it is enough to influence the trajectory of Meliodas' next attack. Meliodas notices the interference mid-motion. He pivots, blade slicing through the warped air, but even his reflexes cannot fully compensate. His attack grazes Rimuru's shoulder, leaving a faint scorch on his coat, but no injury. The impact alone sends vibrations through the ground, alerting every nearby entity to the magnitude of this clash. The sins themselves, wherever they are, would feel the shift as a tremor of latent power. Rimuru steps lightly forward, closing the distance with minimal movement, but the moment his foot touches the fractured earth, spatial pressure emanates outward in controlled waves, forcing Meliodas to reassess his positioning. His blade arcs again, this time with a series of rapid, almost imperceptible slashes, each embedded with demonic energy designed to overwhelm instinct. Rimuru analyzes each movement instantaneously, predicting the next trajectory and redirecting residual force harmlessly into the environment. Small fissures open and close beneath them, debris levitating in controlled suspension, a visual testament to Rimuru's ability to manipulate the battlefield without seeming to exert effort. Meliodas's eyes flash with sudden realization. This is no longer a duel of raw strength or speed. This is a battle of comprehension, adaptation, and layered reaction. Every tactic he uses, every trick he knows, is being observed, dissected, and improved upon in real time. He increases the density of his demonic energy, attempting to break Rimuru's subtle control over the battlefield. The intensity of the aura alone begins to bend reality, and Rimuru responds by fragmenting his magic into multiple vectors, absorbing, redirecting, and dispersing the energy in a way that both neutralizes its impact and extracts valuable data about its composition. The sky itself begins to react. The scar from the dimensional rupture flickers as though sensing the clash below. Clouds twist unnaturally, lightning dancing along the edges, the atmosphere compressing and releasing rhythmically in sync with the battle. Even distant towns feel the tremor of energy radiating outward, birds scattering as though foreseeing catastrophe. The duel has escalated beyond the realm of mortal observation. It is now a collision of forces that strains the very fabric of Britannia's air and land. Meliodas grits his teeth, his grin replaced entirely by focused determination. He surges forward with unprecedented speed, blade swinging in a series of arcs too fast for an ordinary human eye to follow. Where Rimuru meets each strike without panic, his golden eyes unblinking, his posture calm, and yet each motion subtly absorbs knowledge. Each impact provides feedback. Each force met gives him information about how to respond next, how to adjust his positioning, how to turn offense into data. Finally, Meliodas pauses mid-motion, breathing shallow but controlled. Green eyes locked onto Rimuru with unmasked acknowledgement. The realization hits him fully. This opponent is not just powerful, not just skilled. He is adaptive beyond anything Meliodas has ever faced. He evolves mid-fight. No amount of brute force, no amount of demonic energy, no traditional battle tactic will overpower him. He has encountered something entirely outside his experience, someone whose capability lies in observation, calculation, and instantaneous evolution. The battlefield falls silent for a heartbeat, both warriors separated by inches, yet radiating overwhelming force. The air crackles with residual energy, dust swirling around them in suspended eddies, the fractured earth beneath them still resonating from the repeated shockwaves. The holy knights remain frozen, witnesses to a confrontation far beyond their comprehension, and Even the sky seems to pause, holding its breath as two unparalleled forces acknowledge one another's true strength. Rimuru tilts his head slightly, expression calm, golden eyes meeting Meliodas' gaze with faint approval. "Impressive," he says softly, voice carrying weight without aggression. Meliodas exhales slowly, tension still coiled in his stance, and nods ever so slightly. "You're not like anyone I've fought before," he admits. In that silent acknowledgement, the battlefield shifts. This is no longer just a fight. This is a recognition. Power recognized, limits tested. The beginning of a confrontation that will force both sides to escalate beyond what either initially anticipated. The world of Britannia itself seems to sense the shift, trembling subtly in response to the exchange, as if anticipating the even greater chaos yet to come. Meliodas steadies himself, aura compressing like a coiled spring, demonic energy simmering beneath his skin, ready to erupt with precision and power. Rimuru adjusts, analyzing, preparing for the next move, fully aware that this duel is far from over. Both understand one undeniable truth. The battle will not be decided by a single strike, nor by raw force alone, but by strategy, adaptation, and who can truly read the other first. The stage is set, the tension at its peak, and the war between two incomparable forces has only just begun. The faintest flicker of movement in the clouds above hints that higher authorities are observing now, that the demon king and the supreme deity are taking note of this clash. But for the moment, the focus remains entirely on the two combatants standing amidst the ruins, a golden-eyed observer and the dragon sin of destruction, each measuring the other in a battle that promises to push the limits of power, speed, and intellect in ways Britannia has never witnessed before. The ground still quivers, the air still hums, and the duel teeters on the edge of escalation, ready to explode into the next stage of confrontation. The air above Britannia shifts once again, heavier now, as if the world itself has inhaled in anticipation. The clash between Rimuru and Meliodas, so precise, so calculated, has sent ripples through the very laws of the land, awakening something older, more absolute, and far more terrifying than either of them. Deep within the demon realm, beyond the reach of mortal sight, a pulse of authority radiates outward, cold, inexorable, and unmistakably sovereign. The demon king has stirred. His awareness is not bound to time or distance. It moves like a shadow stretching across continents, brushing against the fabric of Britannia itself. Noting the anomaly that has disrupted centuries of careful control, Rimuru senses it almost immediately, a subtle vibration beneath his skin, a cold whisper threading through space itself. The presence is overwhelming, yet methodical. A force that does not merely exist, but commands. This is not an instinctive enemy. This is systemic. It is law incarnate, the embodiment of the demonic hierarchy, designed to suppress irregularities and anomalies like Rimuru with absolute precision. The world responds instinctively to its master. Dark energy coils through the fractured battlefield, veins of corruption spreading outward from unseen centers, twisting the already scarred earth as if asserting ownership. Every demon-tainted crack and fissure begins to pulse, vibrating in sync with the demonic king's will. Above the battlefield, the scar in the sky flickers violently. The disruption caused by Rimuru and Meliodas has drawn attention from both extremes of power in Britannia. But here, the demon king's influence is immediate and suffocating. The aura pressing down on Rimuru is not merely physical or magical, it is conceptual. It enforces rules he does not yet understand, bending probability, limiting free action, and pressing against the frameworks he relies on to adapt. For the first time in this universe, Rimuru senses a system attempting to assimilate him, to rewrite him according to its own absolute logic. Meliodas feels it too, a subtle tightening of the air around him, a hum that vibrates through his bones. He knows the origin of this pulse, even if he does not see it. His connection to the demon realm, to the powers that bind him, alerts him that an authority far greater than any demon, greater than any commandment, is now observing this battle. The Demon King's will is not abstract. It is a weapon of governance, a living law designed to correct deviation, and its gaze has settled squarely on the foreigner who defies natural order. Rimuru's golden eyes scan the battlefield, unflinching. He recognizes the parameters being imposed, sees the boundaries of the system being applied to him, and allows Raphael to process and dissect them instantaneously. The commandments themselves, fragments of law encoded into existence, hum faintly through the air. The Demon King's power does not strike directly. It does not attack yet. It enforces, constrains, tests. Every movement Rimuru makes is measured against the invisible architecture of demonic authority, and he feels the subtle shift in the battlefield as the system reaches out to claim him. Without a sound, the ground beneath him twists. Shadows rise from the fractured earth, forming shapes that are not fully physical but resonate with intent, like the conceptual extensions of law. They lash outward, attempting to bind Rimuru's motion, restrict the expansion of his aura, and interfere with Raphael's instantaneous calculations. The battlefield bends, responding not to force, but to hierarchy. The dark veins coiling through the earth tighten, constricting the space he occupies, attempting to compress him within the rules of the Demon King's reality. Rimuru pauses briefly, assessing. He does not panic, he does not strike blindly. Instead, he activates Seal and Beelzebuth in tandem, threads of his power extending invisibly into the twisting energy around him. One thread pierces the dark extensions of the Demon King's authority, mapping their structure, their hierarchy, and their logic. Another thread extracts fragments of the commandment-infused rules themselves, not to consume in the traditional sense, but to analyze, to understand, to invert. The system recoils slightly, as though it is unused to being studied rather than obeyed, and the shadows pulsing outward falter for an instant. The Demon King does not relent. The conceptual weight increases, reinforcing the restrictions on Rimuru. Invisible laws tighten like coils around his mind and body. Gravity itself feels heavier but unevenly, bending toward conceptual enforcement rather than natural order. The air thickens, magic distorts, and even Meliodas steps back slightly, feeling the tension rise beyond his own regenerative and adaptive capacities. He has faced kings, gods, and cursed enemies, but this is different. This is an authority that defines existence, enforcing its will across distance and matter. Rimuru's expression remains calm. Golden eyes flicker slightly as he begins to unravel the system. Where the Demon King's authority attempts to impose a rule, Rimuru threads a fragment of Raphael's analysis into it. He does not fight directly. He does not defy raw power. He approaches methodically, dissecting the structure of the law and learning its internal logic. Each conceptual binding pulled apart reveals a pathway, a loophole, an opportunity to exploit rather than destroy. The shadows retract slightly in response, confusion rippling through the rigid framework of control. Above, the sky reacts violently to the clash of wills. Storms swirl unnaturally around the dimensional scar, lightning arcing between the twisting dark veins and the lingering remnants of divine light. The battlefield trembles, dust and debris suspended mid-air as if reality itself is uncertain. The Demon King, though distant, pushes harder, extending more of his authority into the plane, attempting to assert absolute control. His will manifests as an oppressive gravity, invisible chains and pulses of law that resonate through the air, attempting to compress Rimuru's existence into compliance. But Rimuru does not flinch. Instead, he extends his analysis deeper, probing the foundation of the commandments themselves, teasing apart their logic without disrupting the local environment beyond minor fluctuations. Each thread of power he extends is precise, consuming fragments of the rules rather than clashing with them. Where the Demon King expects resistance or panic, he finds calm, efficiency, and adaptation. The system recoils, uncertain how to react to an anomaly that does not merely submit or resist, but studies and learns in real time. Rimuru senses the scale of what he is facing. This is no ordinary battle. This is a confrontation of systems. One is predicated on imposed authority, hierarchy, and cosmic enforcement. The other is dynamic, adaptive, and capable of rewriting its own rules instantaneously. He adjusts, allowing spatial distortions to compensate for the weight of conceptual pressure, releasing calculated pulses that neutralize localized applications of the Demon King's authority without openly attacking the source. The shadows coiling around him pulse with frustration, seeking to enforce compliance, but Rimuru remains untethered, anchored to his own logic and the threads of Beelzebuth that weave through the battlefield. Every step he takes is measured, every movement calculated. The Demon King's influence presses outward like a tide, but Rimuru navigates it as though swimming through currents he has already mapped. With each passing moment, the system recoils subtly, revealing cracks in the absolute framework that have existed for centuries untested. These cracks are small, but they are there, and Rimuru notes them meticulously, storing data, preparing to exploit them when the confrontation reaches its peak. The battlefield grows tense beyond comprehension. Meliodas watches from a distance, eyes widening slightly as he realizes the full implications. The foreigner is not merely powerful, he is capable of undermining the very rules that define the Demon King's authority. Shadows ripple outward, responding to the disturbance, yet even as they twist and lash, Rimuru adapts in real time. The Demon King's voice echoes subtly through the conceptual layers of the world, a reverberation of command that shakes the air, the ground, and the minds of those attuned to demonic presence. It is a demand for submission, an assertion of ultimate control. Rimuru does not speak. He does not flinch. He continues to extend his threads into the system, unraveling, mapping, and adapting, creating invisible counterweights to every law imposed on him. The earth quakes, the sky twists, and the battlefield becomes a theater of abstract power, where concepts and laws are as real as steel and flesh. Rimuru stands at the center, golden eyes calm, aura expanding just enough to stabilize the local reality, refusing to be rewritten, refusing to submit. The Demon King senses it. The anomaly persists. A foreign system, unbound by centuries of law, refuses to yield. The war of systems has begun. Rimuru stretches a hand outward, not in attack, but in analysis, sending a subtle pulse into the surrounding authority to test the limits of the Demon King's reach. Shadows coil tighter, attempting to resist. The air thickens further, resisting motion, attempting to enforce compliance. Yet Rimuru threads another fragment of his own magic into the system, dissecting the hierarchy at its root without collision. The battlefield responds, trembling, but he remains untouched, a note of calm amid an ocean of imposed law and conceptual weight. The Demon King's presence intensifies, aware now that this is not a transient anomaly, but a deliberate challenge. Every fragment of authority, every pulse of commandment law, every shadow and binding is engaged to enforce order and suppress the foreigner. Rimuru moves with precision, not striking, not defending in the traditional sense, but unraveling the system itself in a way that the Demon King did not anticipate, testing the limits of absolute control while remaining entirely within the constraints of his own adaptation. The tension reaches a crescendo as invisible forces of law and authority converge on the foreigner. Rimuru's golden eyes flicker, and Raphael calculates the pathways to maintain balance, to survive conceptual enforcement while preparing to exploit weaknesses. The battlefield is suspended in a dynamic equilibrium, alive with the interaction of two systems, one rigid, absolute, and ancient, the other fluid, adaptive, and intelligent. Every molecule of air, every grain of dirt, every residual pulse of energy is caught in this invisible tug-of-war. Rimuru's expression remains unreadable, calm as ever, but internally he catalogues everything. The structure of the Demon King's authority, the limitations of the commandments, the patterns of enforcement, the cracks that appear when applied against a mind capable of instantaneous adaptation. He is not fighting blindly. He is engaging in the ultimate form of combat, system versus system, logic versus absolute law, a battle where each move is measured not for immediate destruction, but for long-term supremacy. The battlefield quakes. Shadows lash outward. Arcs of oppressive energy radiate from hidden nodes. The dimensional scar above pulses in resonance, and Meliodas steps back, recognizing that the true danger of this duel is no longer just the raw power of the foreigner. It is his capability to manipulate the very laws that have defined this world for millennia. Rimuru stands at the eye of this storm, golden eyes calm, aura stabilizing the local reality, threads of Beelzebuth probing, analyzing, and dismantling the system one fragment at a time. The Demon King has reacted. The confrontation of systems has begun. The pressure intensifies. The shadows that coil across the fractured battlefield grow thicker, darker, pulsating with an intelligence that mirrors the demonic king's will. They lash outward in waves, probing Rimuru for weaknesses, each tendril of authority a test of compliance, a measure of resistance. He does not panic, he does not flinch. Instead, his golden eyes narrow slightly as he begins to thread Beelzebuth through the invisible lattice of the Demon King's authority, mapping the structure, reading the logic encoded in the conceptual extensions, and storing it for instantaneous response. Every lash, every shadow, every pulse of suppressive energy meets the same methodical counter. Rimuru does not fight conventionally. He does not attempt to overpower. He adapts, learns, and absorbs. Where the shadows attempt to constrict, he shifts the spatial fabric subtly, redirecting the conceptual chains around him, unraveling them in real time. The earth beneath his feet trembles with the feedback of conflicting laws. Gravity bends unnaturally in localized pockets, the air thickens and disperses erratically, and the residual magic from the Holy Knights flares as it is caught in the systemic tug-of-war. The Demon King amplifies his reach. The oppressive aura becomes denser, more concentrated, as if attempting to compress Rimuru into submission. Rules of reality themselves ripple under the weight of authority, attempting to dictate every action, every thought, every movement. Yet Rimuru remains calm, golden eyes flickering as he threads his awareness outward. Each attempt to impose order is met with precise adaptation. A wave of binding law lashes toward him, designed to halt his aura expansion. He threads a fragment of Raphael into the pulse, neutralizing the effect without breaking his own energy signature, and the wave splinters harmlessly across the battlefield, the fissures in the earth widening as the energy disperses. Above, the dimensional scar reacts violently. Clouds twist in chaotic spirals, arcs of lightning snapping from one vein to another, resonating with the battle below. The sky itself seems to fight against the intrusion of authority, as if the laws of this world are being rewritten faster than they can enforce themselves. The Holy Knights witness the impossible, a battlefield suspended in both time and space, where every pulse of power is met by instantaneous countermeasures, where reality itself seems to bend around the will of a single foreign entity. Meliodas observes, eyes narrowing as he begins to recognize the full scope of what is happening. This is not merely a battle of strength or skill. Rimuru is engaging with the Demon King's authority directly, probing, analyzing, and adapting in real time. Each movement of his hand, each subtle adjustment of his aura, dismantles the rigid enforcement mechanisms embedded in this world. The dragon sin of destruction understands that he is witnessing something unprecedented. The foreigner's ability to survive and neutralize conceptual authority is beyond anything he has seen in centuries of combat. Rimuru steps forward and the ground reacts instantly. Shadows twist and coil to intercept, trying to impose confinement, but he threads Beelzebuth through their structure again, dismantling them without confrontation. The process is surgical, precise, and terrifyingly efficient. Each pulse of the Demon King's authority is absorbed, analyzed, and returned as a neutralized echo, the battlefield itself a testament to the foreigner's dominance over systemic law. The Demon King does not strike directly yet. His presence is a constant suffocating pressure, probing, testing, asserting. It manifests in pulses that attempt to disrupt Rimuru's spatial awareness, to corrupt the natural flow of magic, to impose binding laws on thought and movement. Rimuru responds with subtle shifts, spatial distortions, and threads of magic that dissect the hierarchy of authority rather than challenge it head-on. Every time the system lashes, it encounters adaptation rather than resistance. The shadows retract, reform, lash again, but the effect is minimal. Rimuru's golden eyes flicker as he extends analysis deeper into the structure of the Demon King's enforcement. Each conceptual thread unraveled reveals layers of redundancy, hidden loops, and immutable commands designed to prevent evasion. He notes them all, threading countermeasures into each, preparing a response that is both instantaneous and invisible. Where the Demon King expects suppression, he finds neutralization. Where he expects panic, he finds calm observation. Where he expects resistance, he finds adaptation. The battlefield quakes with the tension of two systems in direct conflict. Shadows pulse and coil, arcs of dark energy slicing through the air, yet Rimuru moves with serene precision, a node of stability amidst chaos. Meliodas takes a cautious step closer, sensing the scope of what Rimuru is capable of, recognizing that even his own regeneration and battle instinct may be secondary to the foreigner's ability to manipulate systemic law. The Dragon Sin's eyes narrow. Every instinct, every tactical calculation tells him that this is no ordinary opponent. Rimuru releases a subtle pulse outward, probing the limits of the Demon King's influence. The shadows tighten, trying to reassert control, but Raphael's real-time calculations guide him, threading counterweights into every tendril, neutralizing the effect without a visible display of power. The result is disorienting. The Demon King's authority is active, present, and overwhelming. Yet Rimuru exists within it unaffected, untethered, analyzing, adapting, and preparing for the next escalation. The sky scar above pulses violently again, reacting to the invisible clash of systems below. The fissures in the ground expand as localized gravity and monoflow fluctuate under the weight of conceptual enforcement and adaptive countermeasures. The battlefield becomes a living network of energy, law, and adaptation. Every pulse, every shadow, every distortion is part of the larger war between the imposed system of the Demon King and the adaptive system of the foreigner who refuses to submit. Rimuru remains at the center, golden eyes steady, aura stabilizing the immediate reality. Threads of Beelzebuth probing the Demon King's authority like fingers testing the rigidity of steel. The Demon King reacts, focusing more energy, more intent, more authority, attempting to compress and constrain. Rimuru adjusts, weaving countermeasures into every pulse, every thread of binding law, every shadow attempting to enforce control. He does not attack. He does not defend in the conventional sense. He studies, dismantles, adapts, and prepares, engaging in a duel of systems rather than brute strength, a battle that stretches the limits of conceptual power itself. The Demon King's presence intensifies, manifesting in waves of conceptual authority that radiate outward like shock waves through the laws of existence. Shadows stretch and coil over the battlefield, their forms constantly shifting, seeking to enclose Rimuru, to compress him into submission. Each tendril carries intent, not mindless force, but coded commands designed to enforce hierarchy and obedience. The air itself seems to resist movement, thickening with layers of invisible law. Yet Rimuru remains entirely composed, golden eyes scanning, aura adjusting, threads of Beelzebuth weaving silently through the imposed order. Each pulse of authority attempts to rewrite the parameters of his existence, to impose boundaries on his magic, to restrict spatial manipulation. Rimuru does not simply resist, he dissects. He threads, he probes, he maps. Raphael processes every adjustment in real time, cataloging the logic embedded in the Demon King's enforcement. What is expected to be absolute becomes modular in Rimuru's hands, each layer of restriction revealing hidden redundancies, patterns that can be inverted, loops that can be exploited. The shadows lash again, coiling tighter, striking with greater intent, yet every strike is met not with brute force, but with controlled adaptation. Above, the dimensional scar pulses violently, as if sensing the clash of systems below. Lightning arcs between the residual divine light and the coiling shadows of demonic authority, illuminating the battlefield in fractured flashes. Debris levitates, fissures widen and close, and the ground quakes as the invisible struggle escalates. Even the holy knights at a distance feel the oppressive weight of power, understanding instinctively that this is no ordinary fight. The rules of the world are being tested, bent, and rewritten in real time by a foreign presence that refuses to submit. Rimuru extends a subtle pulse outward, probing the limits of the Demon King's reach. The shadows lunge in response, attempting to bind, to compress, to erase. Each attempt is neutralized silently, the energy dissected and redirected. Where the Demon King expects panic, he finds calm calculation. Where he expects resistance, he finds precise adaptation. Every thread unraveled, every tendril neutralized is catalogued, stored, and prepared for later exploitation. Meliodas watches from the edge of the battlefield, green eyes narrowing. He senses it too, the extraordinary nature of Rimuru's ability to interact with the Demon King's system directly. This is beyond speed, beyond strength, beyond regeneration. This is the manipulation of authority itself, the ability to probe, analyze, and invert laws that have governed existence for millennia. The dragon's sin recognizes that even his own power, formidable though it is, may be secondary in this confrontation. Rimuru steps forward slightly, not aggressively, but purposefully. The spatial distortions around him shift in response to the Demon King's pressure, bending gravity, reshaping magic flows, stabilizing the immediate area. Shadows attempt to coil, attempting to anticipate movement, but Raphael anticipates them first, threading counterweights that neutralize their effect before they can enforce the system. The battlefield becomes a dynamic network of force and counterforce, a living demonstration of system versus system. The Demon King senses the anomaly persisting. His authority lashes harder, a conceptual tide pressing on every aspect of Rimuru's being. Gravity, magic, and spatial integrity are tested simultaneously. Yet Rimuru adapts, expanding his aura strategically, threading countermeasures into every pulse of enforcement, dismantling restrictions in real time, analyzing the architecture of power itself. Every tendril of shadow that strikes is neutralized not with aggression, but with precise adaptation, turning the system's own force into information, into advantage. The clash escalates further. Fissures in the ground widen, the air hums with residual energy, and the dimensional scar above pulses in resonance with the unseen battle below. The Demon King's will is absolute, yet Rimuru persists, a node of calm within the storm of authority, capable of dismantling imposed laws as they strike, turning enforced obedience into data, extracting logic from intent. The battlefield becomes a theater of unseen conflict, conceptual power clashing with adaptive intelligence, a struggle that stretches the limits of what the world can sustain. Rimuru's golden eyes flicker, his aura expanding just enough to stabilize localized reality, threads of Beelzebuth probing deeper into the Demon King's authority. The shadows tighten, the weight increases, yet Rimuru remains unflinching, countering every conceptual lash with silent precision. The system recoils, uncertain, unprepared for a force that does not merely resist, but learns, adapts, and threads itself through the very foundation of absolute authority. The Demon King's awareness sharpens, pressing outward in concentrated surges of law and intent. Rimuru continues to respond, dissecting, mapping, and neutralizing, preparing for escalation. Every pulse of control, every lash of shadow, every ripple of gravitational and magical distortion meets precise adaptation rather than resistance. The battlefield is suspended between two systems, one rigid, absolute, and ancient, the other fluid, adaptive, and intelligent. Rimuru stands at the center, golden eyes calm, aura steady, threads probing, as the war of systems escalates toward its inevitable confrontation. The moment the Demon King realizes Rimuru cannot be suppressed, the scale of escalation shifts entirely. The battlefield quakes not just with power, but with consequence. The very air of Britannia bends under the pressure of two systems clashing, one ancient, one adaptive, one enforcing absolute law, the other rewriting and unmaking every assumption. Above, the dimensional scar pulses violently, as if the world itself senses the irreversible shift about to unfold. A low hum reverberates across the land, growing louder, a resonance that stretches beyond mountains and forests, reaching the high altitudes where angels patrol, where heaven's own authority senses the disturbance. The war has escalated beyond mortal comprehension, and now it draws the eyes of entities far older, far greater than the forces currently engaged on the ground. Rimuru's golden eyes sweep across the battlefield, calm yet intensely focused. He senses every layer of pressure, every extension of authority, both demonic and now divine. The subtle disturbances in the air, the way light refracts unnaturally, the patterns of residual energy across the fissured ground. They all speak to forces gathering. Heaven has noticed. The archangels, guardians of the cosmic balance, feel a presence unbound, a force that operates outside the laws that structure their reality. They perceive Rimuru not merely as a foreigner, but as an anomaly capable of altering the very hierarchy of power they have maintained for millennia. Without warning, the sky itself reacts. Clouds twist violently, spiraling into dense vortexes that shimmer with celestial energy. Beams of radiant light pierce downward, not randomly, but with intent, forming complex sigils across the fractured battlefield. These are not attacks in the conventional sense. They are a declaration of authority, a systematic attempt to impose divine law, to stabilize the reality that Rimuru now influences. The weight of heaven itself presses down, a conceptual force designed to correct the anomaly that refuses to submit. The holy knights and remaining sins feel the tremor, even at a distance, and instinctively brace as if aware that the rules governing existence are bending in real time. Meliodas steps back slightly, blade in hand, observing the sudden surge of celestial authority. His green eyes flash with recognition. This is beyond mere demonic confrontation. This is an engagement of cosmic forces, a battle between the ancient hierarchies of heaven and the raw, adaptive intelligence of a foreigner who refuses to yield. Even he, the dragon sin of destruction, senses the magnitude, the stakes now extending far beyond the battlefield, reaching into the foundations of power and law across realms. Rimuru does not flinch. He does not hesitate. Each pulse of divine energy, each wave of light meant to stabilize or suppress, is analyzed in real time. Threads of Beelzebuth extend outward, probing the geometry of the sigils, decoding the layered logic embedded in the radiance, extracting patterns, and neutralizing the enforcement without directly colliding with the raw power. The energy bends subtly around him, dissipated in controlled arcs rather than overwhelming bursts. Where heaven expects domination, it finds adaptation. Where it expects submission, it finds calm precision. The dimensional scar above pulses violently, as if reacting to the escalation below. Lightning arcs between the celestial beams and the shadows left by demonic authority, striking with raw, chaotic intensity. The battlefield becomes a maelstrom of conflicting forces, a war of concepts more than flesh and steel. The ground quakes, fissures widen, and airborne debris twists erratically, caught in the overlapping gravitational and magical distortions. The clash is no longer localized. The consequences radiate outward, disturbing forests, rivers, and even distant settlements, though few understand the source. Rimuru senses the full scope of escalation. The Demon King system presses from below, laced with centuries of enforcement. Commandments layered into authority that constrains reality. Above, heaven imposes divine law, radiant sigils enforcing order, threatening to overwrite the very rules of existence. Between these two forces, Rimuru operates as an anomaly, threading through conceptual enforcement, dissecting each layer of law, neutralizing constraints, and adapting with speed and precision unmatched by any entity on this plane. Each pulse of energy that should incapacitate him is rendered harmless, analyzed, and converted into informational advantage. The holy knights and remaining sins watch in stunned silence. The ground quakes beneath their feet, the air vibrates with a tangible hum, and the dimensional scar above reflects a storm of power previously unimagined. Even the forces they have worshipped, the deities and demons who have shaped their world, falter in recognition of the anomaly at its center. Rimuru does not move recklessly. He stands amidst the chaos, golden eyes steady, aura expanding subtly. Spatial distortion stabilizing the battlefield locally, threads of Beelzebuth probing deeper into both systems. Each analysis, each neutralization, each subtle shift pushes the balance incrementally in his favor. Above, the first archangel appears, wings spanning hundreds of meters, feathers glowing with pure radiant energy. They descend not with immediate hostility, but with authority. Their gaze pierces the battlefield, locking onto Rimuru. The presence alone reverberates across the land, causing residual energy in the fissures to pulse violently. A voice resonates conceptually rather than audibly, conveying judgment, law, and expectation simultaneously. Heaven demands compliance. Heaven demands order. The foreigner in the center of the storm defies not only mortal authority but divine law itself. Rimuru tilts his head slightly, golden eyes reflecting both the celestial radiance and the lingering shadows of demonic authority. He does not speak, but his aura shifts in response. Threads of Beelzebuth weaving through the overwhelming systems, extracting logic, mapping enforcement, and preparing countermeasures. Every conceptual lash, every pulse of divine judgment, every ripple of enforced law is met not with defiance, but with precise adaptation. He does not fight recklessly. He engages the system itself, dismantling restrictions as they strike, turning enforcement into information, threats into understanding, authority into data. The battlefield quakes with unprecedented intensity. Lightning arcs, shadows lash, radiant beams pierce the air, and gravity fluctuates erratically as overlapping systems vie for control. Meliodas watches intently, recognizing the shift. This is no longer merely a battle for supremacy in combat. This is a war of irreversibility. Every pulse of energy, every manipulation of law, every shift in spatial integrity moves the world closer to an escalation that cannot be undone. Rimuru stands at the center of this storm, the eye of a convergence that defies centuries of established order, golden eyes calm, aura steady, threads probing, calculating, and adapting in real time. The archangel lowers slightly, preparing to strike, the full weight of heaven behind their every movement. Simultaneously, tendrils of demonic authority tighten, coiling like serpents beneath the ground, pressing upward, asserting control from the depths. The battlefield becomes a theater of ultimate escalation, a crucible where mortal, divine, and demonic powers intersect, and Rimuru remains untethered, calculating, adapting, and preparing to turn every layer of law, every shred of authority into an opportunity for domination. The war against heaven has begun, and its consequences will ripple irreversibly across Britannia and beyond. The archangel descends fully, wings spanning the horizon, radiant light cascading from every feather, each beat of their wings sending ripples through the air that distort gravity and pull at the edges of perception. Every movement carries authority, every gesture communicates law, and the battlefield trembles beneath their presence. Their eyes, glowing with judgment and the weight of eons, lock onto Rimuru, piercing through the layers of his spatial manipulation, attempting to impose compliance at a conceptual level. Heaven does not act with force alone. It enforces rules, bending reality to its will, attempting to rewrite existence around those who defy it. Rimuru's golden eyes meet the divine gaze, calm and unflinching. He does not falter. Threads of Beelzebuth extend outward like tendrils of logic, probing the architecture of divine enforcement, analyzing the mechanisms, and threading countermeasures through every layered pulse of celestial law. Each radiant sigil that arcs downward, each conceptual lash meant to restrain him, is intercepted, neutralized, and repurposed into data. He does not attack recklessly, nor does he defend in the conventional sense. He operates as a system within a system, dismantling enforcement at the structural level and adapting in real time. The Demon King's presence reacts to the new variables. Shadows coil tighter, arcs of dark energy pulse faster, and the earth itself seems to shiver beneath the clash of extremes. From below, tendrils of authority shoot upward, attempting to pin Rimuru in place. But his spatial manipulation and adaptive magic reroute the pressure subtly, diffusing it, redirecting it, and analyzing it for vulnerabilities. Where heaven imposes rules from above, the Demon King enforces constraints from below, and Rimuru exists in the precise center, a node of calm intelligence dissecting every action from both directions simultaneously. Meliodas steps forward, blade at the ready, green eyes flickering between caution and awe. Even he can feel the strain of the escalating forces, the convergence of systems that should never coexist. Yet here they are, locked in invisible struggle. He recognizes the magnitude. The foreigner is not only resisting the Demon King's authority, but is simultaneously interacting with heaven's law in a way that defies centuries of established hierarchy. The war is no longer localized. It has reached a scale that could rewrite power structures across realms. Rimuru's golden eyes flicker, aura expanding subtly to stabilize the immediate battlefield. He threads Beelzebuth into the converging forces, neutralizing localized enforcement while mapping structural patterns. Every pulse of divine energy, every tendril of demonic authority, every residual magical fluctuation is analyzed, cataloged, and used to anticipate the next layer of escalation. The battlefield quakes with the energy of conceptual enforcement, colliding with adaptive intelligence, each pulse threatening to tear reality apart. Yet Rimuru remains centered, unflinching, calculating the parameters of survival and dominance simultaneously. The archangel's wings flare outward, sending cascades of radiant energy across the shattered terrain. Each feather carries enforcement, light imbued with conceptual law that attempts to restrict motion, rewrite magic, and impose compliance. Rimuru does not recoil. He extends a subtle pulse outward, threading his own adaptation into the flow, dissecting the structure and redirecting it harmlessly around him. The radiant waves split and fracture, arcs of pure law neutralized before they can fully form. Every strike of authority becomes information, every attempt at compliance a lesson in structural manipulation. From below, the Demon King intensifies his presence further. Shadows tighten, black veins of energy wrapping around fissures, reaching toward Rimuru's aura with intent, seeking to collapse his control. The ground trembles violently as the conceptual tendrils clash with the spatial distortions Rimuru maintains. Gravity fluctuates locally, air thickens, and residual energy pulses unpredictably, a chaotic dance of opposing systems. Rimuru threads adaptive countermeasures into every wave, dismantling the pressure without overt display of power, maintaining control while simultaneously analyzing every variable, every pattern, every potential loophole in the enforcement structure. The sky ripples violently. The dimensional scar pulses in resonance with the battle below, arcs of lightning dancing between celestial sigils and demonic shadows, illuminating the battlefield in chaotic flashes. The holy knights and scattered sins witness the impossible. A war not just of power, but of systems, where every pulse of energy carries structural intent, every movement carries enforcement, and the foreigner at the center turns law into data, authority into opportunity, and imposed order into a field of calculated advantage. Rimuru tilts his head slightly, golden eyes steady, threads of Beelzebuth probing deeper into the overlapping enforcement mechanisms. The archangel hovers, wings unfurling wider, radiant light thickening, while below shadows pulse with increasing intensity. Every conceptual lash, every attempt at suppression, every rule imposed is met with precise adaptation, dismantling each layer in real time. The battlefield is no longer just terrain. It is a crucible where the laws of heaven, the mandates of the Demon King, and the adaptive intelligence of Rimuru collide. Meliodas recognizes the scale. His voice cuts through the hum of energy, low but charged with urgency. This is beyond anything I've seen. The realization hits him fully. The foreigner at the center is not merely powerful. He is capable of undermining systems themselves, neutralizing enforcement, and adapting to absolute law in ways that defy comprehension. Rimuru does not respond verbally. He does not need to. Every subtle adjustment, every pulse of aura, every thread of magic communicates dominance and awareness. The war against heaven has truly begun, and its escalation it is irreversible. The battlefield quakes further, fissures widening, arcs of radiant and shadow energy colliding mid-air. Gravity fluctuates erratically, debris suspended unnaturally, and even the dimensional scar above thrums with violent resonance. Rimuru stands at the center, golden eyes calm, aura stabilizing local reality, threads of Beelzebuth probing, analyzing, and dismantling enforcement in real time. The forces of heaven and the Demon King converge upon him, yet he remains untethered, adaptive, precise, and unyielding. The war against heaven is escalating beyond recovery, a conflict that will redefine power, law, and existence itself. The sky roils violently as heaven's authority surges downward, the archangel's wings beating with thunderous intensity, each feather igniting the air with conceptual energy meant to rewrite the battlefield according to divine law. The radiant sigils flare with impossible brightness, forming intricate patterns across the shattered earth, each designed to impose restriction, compress Rimuru's spatial manipulation, and neutralize his adaptive capabilities. Yet Rimuru's golden eyes remain steady, aura calm. Threads of Beelzebuth weaving through every pulse, probing, analyzing, and dismantling the layered enforcement with surgical precision. Every wave of divine intent that should obliterate him is instead transformed into data, used to anticipate, counter, and prepare for the next escalation. From beneath, the Demon King reacts to the shift in balance. Shadows coil with renewed intensity, black energy lashing outward from the cracks in the earth, wrapping around fissures and debris, attempting to anchor Rimuru's presence to the laws of the demon realm. Tendrils of authority press upward, infused with centuries of layered commands, curses, and bindings designed to suppress irregularity. The battlefield quakes under the pressure of overlapping forces. Gravity distorts erratically, air thickens with opposing energies, and magic pulses unpredictably, a chaotic orchestra of enforcement colliding with adaptation. Rimuru threads counterweights through every push and pull, neutralizing oppressive forces without overt display, converting every attempt at suppression into understanding, and every attack into structural insight. Meliodas watches from the edge of the chaos, green eyes wide as he begins to fully grasp the scale of what is happening. The foreigner at the center is no longer just an opponent. He is an anomaly capable of interacting with and manipulating the laws of heaven and the demon king simultaneously. Meliodas feels the weight of forces beyond comprehension pressing down on him, and even his regenerative power and battle instincts strain against the surreal intensity. The sins scattered across the battlefield instinctively brace as reality warps around them. Mountains tremble, forests bend under invisible currents, and rivers shift in response to the overlapping gravitational and magical distortions. The war is no longer confined to physical strikes. It has expanded into a conceptual battlefield that envelopes all of Britannia. Rimuru takes a calculated step forward, golden eyes scanning the convergence of celestial and demonic enforcement. Spatial distortions ripple subtly with each movement, threads of Beelzebuth probing deeper, threading through both divine and infernal systems, dissecting the internal logic, neutralizing restraints, and converting pressure into insight. Each pulse of radiant energy from above and each tendril of shadow from below are analyzed and disassembled in real time. Where heaven expects obedience, it finds calculation. Where the demon king expects suppression, he finds neutralization. Every force that should dictate action instead becomes information. Every layer of enforcement a tool to further Rimuru's understanding of the battlefield. Above, the archangel flares brilliantly, sending cascades of light that fracture across the terrain in geometric perfection. The radiant energy compresses areas of space, attempting to immobilize, enforce compliance, and rewrite magic flows. Rimuru does not resist in a conventional sense. He adapts in real time, splitting energy threads, diffusing concentrated pulses, and threading analysis through every fragment of divine enforcement. Each wave of light bends subtly around him, neutralized without overt expenditure of power, and transformed into patterns he can exploit for subsequent adaptation. The demon king's shadows intensify in response. Black veins of energy surge upward from the fissures, twisting and coiling in tandem, attempting to encase Rimuru in absolute confinement. The ground shakes violently. Stones crack and leap into the air, and residual energy pulses chaotically as two systems attempt to assert dominance over a single unpredictable node. Rimuru threads adaptive measures into every tendril, dismantling the pressure while simultaneously analyzing the structural integrity of the authority itself. Each attempt to compress or control him feeds into Raphael's calculations, allowing Rimuru to anticipate and counter with greater precision. The dimensional scar above pulses violently in resonance with the battle. Lightning arcs chaotically between the radiant sigils of heaven and the shadows of the demon king, illuminating the battlefield in erratic flashes. Dust, debris, and residual magic levitate unnaturally, caught in overlapping fields of enforcement and adaptation. Even the air hums with the collision of conceptual power, vibrating in a manner that reaches deep into the subconscious of all witnesses, signaling the arrival of a conflict that cannot be ignored. Rimuru's golden eyes flicker. He adjusts his aura subtly, stabilizing local reality, threading countermeasures into the converging systems, and turning enforcement into data streams. Every conceptual lash, every pulse of authority, every gravitational or magical distortion is neutralized with surgical precision. He does not fight recklessly, nor does he submit. He adapts, dissects, and threads, existing simultaneously within heaven's law and the demon king's enforcement, converting the pressure of absolute authority into structured insight. Meliodas watches intently, green eyes narrowing. The realization strikes him fully. Rimuru is not merely powerful. He is capable of undermining the very structures of divine and demonic authority, interacting with and neutralizing enforcement on a systemic level. The implications are staggering. The battlefield is no longer a place of physical conflict alone. It has become a crucible of law and adaptation, a war of systems where each pulse, each thread, and each movement can irreversibly shift the balance of power. The Archangel readies another descent, wings flaring, radiant energy thickening, every movement brimming with authority. Below, the Demon King's shadows coil tighter, compressing the battlefield from beneath, threatening to erase localized reality. Yet Rimuru remains untethered, golden eyes steady, threads probing, analyzing, and dismantling enforcement with surgical precision. The battlefield quivers violently, gravity fluctuates, energy pulses unpredictably, and reality itself strains against the collision of heaven, hell, and the foreigner at its center. The war against heaven has escalated beyond reversal, a confrontation that will reshape the very foundations of Britannia and beyond. The battlefield falls into a tense, almost eerie calm, though the air is still thick with residual energy from the unprecedented clash of heaven, hell, and Rimuru's unmatched adaptability. The sky above Britannia is a fractured canvas of radiant sigils and shadowed veins, constantly shifting as though the world itself is holding its breath. Fissures crack the land in unpredictable patterns, rivers of magic pulse with erratic intensity, and the echoes of colliding authority reverberate through every corner of the realm. The archangels hover, wings spread wide, radiance thrumming with residual judgment, while shadows of the Demon King writhe in constant flux across the ground, pulsating with intent to reclaim dominance. Yet at the center, golden eyes remain steady, unblinking, calm, and calculating, absorbing every fragment of power, every thread of authority, every residual trace of control, and folding them into a larger understanding of the battlefield. Rimuru steps forward, aura subtly expanding, weaving threads of Beelzebuth into the fractured weave of reality itself. Every pulse of divine light and demonic shadow is carefully dissected, repurposed, and analyzed, turned into structured advantage without a single overt strike. The battlefield is no longer merely contested terrain. It has become a living grid of power and potential, mapped, neutralized, and dominated through adaptation alone. The forces of heaven attempt to assert compliance, sending radiant constructs lashing outward. But each wave of energy meets controlled, precise spatial manipulations that twist, split, and redirect the enforcement harmlessly. The Demon King's shadows coil tighter, attempting to assert subterranean dominance. Yet Rimuru threads through them, neutralizing constraint while extracting structural logic that will allow him to predict the next sequence of enforcement. Meliodas watches, tense but fascinated, sensing the shift in the very essence of authority. The foreigner is not merely surviving the impossible, he is bending absolute law to his advantage. Each pulse of enforcement from above and below strengthens Rimuru's understanding, turning what should be insurmountable dominance into patterns, loops, and exploitable vulnerabilities. Where heaven expects obedience, it encounters analysis. Where hell expects suppression, it encounters adaptation. The battlefield vibrates under the weight of these simultaneous forces, and yet Rimuru remains untethered, golden eyes steady, aura stabilizing local reality, threads probing deeper into the fabric of authority. With a deliberate gesture, Rimuru extends a pulse outward, subtly warping the overlapping systems, neutralizing constraints, and converting the chaotic energy of enforcement into a lattice of controlled influence. Shadows coil inward as the Demon King reacts, surging upward, attempting to reassert dominance through compression and binding. Above, radiant sigils flare, attempting to impose conceptual restraint. Yet every attempt is dissected in real time, deconstructed and inverted. Rimuru does not strike directly. He rewrites the battlefield at a systemic level, turning both divine and infernal authority into tools of stabilization rather than instruments of oppression. The archangels and remaining sins realize that the foreigner's dominance is no longer just adaptive. It is absolute. Rimuru is no longer merely responding. He is dictating the terms of engagement. Every pulse, every enforcement mechanism, every residual trace of magic or authority bends subtly toward equilibrium under his influence. The battlefield becomes an extension of his will, not through raw destruction but through systemic control, turning layers of law and power into a network that moves, responds, and anticipates alongside him. Britannia itself seems to respond, the fractured land stabilizing as threads of Rimuru's influence spread outward, integrating the environment into his expanding framework of control. Meliodas steps closer, sensing the full magnitude of what has occurred. The green dragon's sin of destruction realizes that the foreigner has done what no mortal, demon, or deity has managed before. He has turned the framework of absolute authority itself into a tool under his direction. The demon king recoils in conceptual recognition, the shadows pulsing in hesitation, unsure how to reclaim dominance over an entity that no longer merely reacts but anticipates and neutralizes every system. Above, the archangels hesitate, wings frozen in mid-beat, radiant authority pulsating with the shock of encountering an anomaly that cannot be dictated or suppressed. Rimuru's golden eyes sweep across the battlefield, aura expanding subtly, threads probing and stabilizing, a calm center in a storm that could have destroyed the world. With a subtle shift of his aura, Rimuru threads his control into the layers of authority that bind the Demon King's domain, gradually unraveling enforcement from the foundation upward. The shadows contract, tendrils recoiling as if sensing the futility of resistance. Above, the radiant sigils of heaven pulse with decreasing effectiveness, each conceptual lash dissipating harmlessly as Rimuru threads adaptive control through their logic, turning enforcement into passive structure rather than active constraint. The battlefield, once fractured by opposing systems, begins to stabilize under his influence. Mountains and rivers adjust subtly. Fissures seal partially, and air currents shift into smooth, controlled patterns. Meliodas observes, astonished, as Rimuru's golden eyes flicker with precise intent. The foreigner does not seek conquest through destruction, but through control, manipulation, and rewriting of fundamental authority. Every aspect of heaven and hell's combined enforcement has been neutralized and converted into a lattice of influence that Rimuru commands effortlessly. The Demon King and the Archangel exchange what could be interpreted as acknowledgement, an unspoken recognition that the anomaly at the center has surpassed the limits of both divine and demonic law. Rimuru's influence spread steadily, integrating both systems into his understanding and asserting dominance without a single overt strike. The holy knights scattered across the battlefield feel it instinctively. The oppressive weight of enforcement lifts, replaced by a calm sense of order that radiates outward. Even the sins sense the shift. The chaos that once threatened to tear the battlefield apart now folding into structured equilibrium. Rimuru, golden eyes calm, aura steady, threads of Beelzebuth extending into every fragment of power, stands at the center of Britannia as an unseen hand guiding the balance. He is no longer just a foreigner. He is a node of authority, a system capable of overriding the rules that once governed the land, poised to rewrite the hierarchy itself. Above and below, heaven and hell sense it fully. Conceptual enforcement and divine law quiver under the foreigner's influence. The Demon King's shadows pulse in reluctant compliance, while the Archangel's wings fold slightly, radiant energy stabilizing into a passive lattice that Rimuru now threads seamlessly into his adaptive framework. The battlefield, once a theater of irreconcilable forces, has become a controlled ecosystem, every pulse of energy and every enforcement mechanism folded into Rimuru's system. He does not need to strike to dominate. The law itself bends under his influence, and Britannia begins to stabilize under a new, unprecedented hierarchy. Rimuru steps forward, golden eyes sweeping the battlefield. His threads of influence reach outward, integrating the remaining sins, the holy knights, and residual forces of heaven and hell into a cohesive framework. Every system of enforcement, every pulse of authority, Every residual trace of magic becomes a tool under his control. The Demon King recoils in conceptual recognition. The Archangel hesitates, and even Meliodas steps back, sensing the magnitude of what has occurred. Rimuru has done what no entity has achieved before. He has not merely survived, he has rewritten the hierarchy of Britannia itself, establishing himself as the uncontested center of authority, poised to become the new Demon King. The battlefield has settled into an uneasy equilibrium, yet the tension remains palpable. The air charged with residual energy from the unprecedented collision of heaven, hell, and Rimuru's adaptive presence. Fissures still crack the ground, rivers of residual mana pulse irregularly, and the sky above Britannia is a fractured mosaic of radiant light and shadowed veins, constantly shifting as the remnants of opposing forces try to reassert themselves. Despite the apparent calm, every movement, every fluctuation in energy is now subtly under Rimuru's influence. Golden eyes scan the horizon, assessing not only the terrain, but the lingering patterns of authority, detecting even the smallest ripple of enforcement from the Demon King or heaven, and threading adaptive responses into each one. Rimuru takes deliberate steps across the fractured battlefield, each movement subtly reshaping local reality. Shadows retreat where once they coiled aggressively, radiant sigils of heaven lose rigidity, and the raw pulse of authority from the Demon King weakens under the weight of systemic adaptation. His aura extends silently, stabilizing the environment, turning chaotic residual energy into structured channels that flow harmoniously across the land. He does not need to strike, and he does not need to command verbally. The very laws of Britannia now bend to the precision of his calculated influence. Every force that once opposed him is now woven into his adaptive network, reinforcing the dominance he exerts over both hell and heaven. Meliodas, still standing on the edge of the battlefield, begins to sense the full scope of Rimuru's achievement. The green dragon's sin of destruction, who has faced countless threats and battled entities of unimaginable power, now observes something beyond even his comprehension. Rimuru has integrated divine authority and demonic command into a singular, cohesive framework under his control. This is not mere power, it is systemic mastery, the ability to dictate the flow of law, energy, and influence without direct conflict. The battlefield itself, once fractured and chaotic, now flows in subtle harmony under the unseen guidance of the foreigner. The Archangel hovers above, wings partially folded, radiant energy stabilizing but still potent, a symbol of heaven's reluctant acquiescence. The weight of divine law, once overwhelming, now coexists within Rimuru's adaptive network. Similarly, the Demon King's shadows pulse tentatively, no longer lashing out with intent to dominate, but integrated as part of a greater, controlled structure. Britannia itself seems to respond to this new order. Mountains realign subtly, rivers settle into smoother courses, and the air vibrates with a sense of restrained energy rather than chaotic strain. The world is healing from the war, but under rules now defined by Rimuru's system rather than the old hierarchies. Rimuru pauses at the center of the battlefield, golden eyes surveying the expanse. His threads of influence stretch to every corner, subtly connecting every remnant of heaven, hell, and mortal magic. Each pulse of energy, every enforcement mechanism, every lingering aura is integrated into a framework that obeys the logic he dictates. This is not conquest by destruction, but by structural dominance. Authority itself has become a tool under his command, enforcing stability while simultaneously bending to his adaptive intelligence. The sins, the holy knights, and even residual angels and demons feel it instinctively. The rules have changed, and Rimuru stands at the epicenter of the new order. The remaining holy knights and sins approach cautiously, their movements tentative as they sense the new balance. The oppressive weight of conceptual authority has lifted, replaced by a controlled and calm network of influence. Each step they take is subtly guided by the threads Rimuru has woven, ensuring equilibrium without overt coercion. The Demon King's shadows twitch in acknowledgement, and the Archangel's wings shimmer with recognition. The divine and infernal systems bending subtly into alignment under Rimuru's unseen hand. Britannia is no longer ruled by ancient hierarchies, by the brute enforcement of heaven or the calculated dominion of hell, but by a foreigner whose influence threads seamlessly through every layer of authority. Rimuru shifts slightly, and the battlefield reacts. Fissures close slowly. The erratic pulse of residual energy steadies, and rivers adjust their flow to align with subtle gravitational and magical harmonics he imposes. His threads of Beelzebuth extend outward, stabilizing every fragment of power that lingers from the clash, neutralizing potential points of conflict before they can manifest. Where chaos once reigned, order now exists, not imposed externally, but threaded through an adaptive system that Rimuru controls completely. The world itself feels alive under his influence, responding to the subtle logic of his network, flowing in ways that favor balance, efficiency, and structured authority. Meliodas steps forward cautiously, eyes narrowing with a mix of awe and reluctant respect. The dragon's sin recognizes that Rimuru has done what no one in Britannia, not demon, human, or god, has managed before. He has rewritten the rules themselves. Authority has been neutralized and repurposed under a single guiding influence. The sins around him exchange glances, sensing the new hierarchy forming. Even the Archangel hovers in stillness, radiant wings reflecting the new equilibrium. The weight of heaven's authority bending subtly into Rimuru's adaptive framework. Rimuru's golden eyes sweep the battlefield once more, aura pulsing subtly, threads of Beelzebuth extending into every residual force, stabilizing them under his control. He does not speak. His presence alone communicates command. The Demon King recoils in conceptual recognition. The Archangel hesitates, and even Meliodas steps back, acknowledging the shift. Rimuru is no longer a foreign anomaly. He is the central node of authority, the orchestrator of law, the unseen hand guiding Britannia. The old hierarchies have fractured irreversibly, and in their place, Rimuru's influence threads seamlessly, asserting dominance without overt violence, establishing him as the new Demon King of Britannia, a ruler whose authority is defined not by brute force, but by the control and adaptation of power itself. The battlefield settles into a surreal calm, yet the energy still hums with the magnitude of the war that just transpired. The fractured sky above Britannia slowly begins to realign, the chaotic mesh of radiant sigils and shadowed veins softening into subtle pulses of energy, like a heartbeat reverberating across the land. The fissures that tore through the mountains and plains are partially healed, the rivers flowing more smoothly, and the residual magic stabilizing into a rhythm dictated by Rimuru's adaptive control. Every fragment of divine or demonic power is now threaded seamlessly into his system. Each pulse, each tendril, each echo of enforcement harmonized under a single, unyielding intelligence. Rimuru stands at the center, golden eyes calm, aura pulsating steadily, a living nexus of authority, observation, and adaptation. The Archangel hovers above, wings partially folded, radiant feathers shimmering with a soft glow, no longer lashing the battlefield with overwhelming enforcement, but integrated into Rimuru's lattice of influence. Even the Demon King's shadows, once writhing aggressively, pulse now in quiet acknowledgement, their tendrils coiled yet responsive, part of the framework Rimuru maintains effortlessly. The sins and remaining holy knights move closer, instinctively understanding the new rules of Britannia. They do not approach with fear or hostility. Instead, there is recognition, even awe, as they sense that this foreigner has achieved what none before could. He has rewritten the fundamental hierarchy, threading every force, every law, and every ounce of authority into his adaptive system. Rimuru steps forward, each movement deliberate, aura stabilizing the battlefield further. His threads of Beelzebuth extend like invisible filaments, connecting every fragment of power and influence into a cohesive network that responds instantly to anomalies. Where previously chaotic energy threatened to tear the terrain apart, now there is harmony, subtle yet absolute. Even the natural elements seem to bend to this new order, wind currents flowing smoothly, residual lightning settling into stable arcs, gravity fluctuations normalizing, and the air itself vibrating with a gentle resonance of equilibrium. Britannia is no longer a land fractured by war between heaven, hell, and mortal forces. It is a world quietly rewritten, an ecosystem under the calculated unseen control of Rimuru. Meliodas steps forward, green eyes wide but focused, recognizing the profound shift. The dragon sin of destruction senses fully that Rimuru has achieved systemic mastery, something no mortal, demon, or deity has ever accomplished. By threading both divine and demonic authority into his adaptive control, Rimuru has not only survived the impossible, he has established a new hierarchy, one that does not rely on domination through raw force, but on the control of law, energy, and structure itself. The sins exchange glances, silently acknowledging the reality of their new order. Even the Archangel and Demon King, entities who once commanded absolute authority, now exist within the framework Rimuru has crafted, unable to challenge him without violating the very threads he weaves through reality. Rimuru's golden eyes sweep across Britannia one last time, aura steady, threads extending into every corner of the land, stabilizing every residual force. The ground hums subtly under his influence. Rivers flow with quiet efficiency, and the atmosphere vibrates with controlled energy. He does not need to speak or strike to assert dominance. Authority itself has become his instrument, and every being on the battlefield intuitively understands the shift. Britannia has been irreversibly rewritten, old hierarchies replaced by the adaptive influence of a foreigner who has become its central node. Rimuru is no longer merely a visitor. He is the new demon king of Britannia, the orchestrator of a realm where power is guided by understanding, precision, and structural mastery rather than brute force. Even as the sins, holy knights, archangels, and shadows of the Demon King acknowledge this new order, the world itself resonates with the change. Fissures seal, gravity stabilizes, and residual magical currents align into subtle flows that ripple across the land. Rimuru's influence threads into the very fabric of Britannia, ensuring stability, control, and balance. He has not only survived impossible battles, he has redefined the rules of engagement, the hierarchy of authority, and the very nature of power in this realm. Heaven and hell, once opposed, now coexist within the network of influence he has established, and all who dwell in Britannia must recognize his central command. Rimuru pauses at the center of the battlefield, golden eyes reflecting both divine radiance and infernal shadow, aura radiating calm dominance, threads of Beelzebuth extending invisibly into every fragment of power, stabilizing, observing, and maintaining. The world has shifted irreversibly, and Rimuru's presence is now synonymous with authority. The sins and holy knights watch silently. The archangel and demon king's forces hesitate in acknowledgement, and even the environment itself seems to bend to the new order. Britannia belongs to him not through violence, but through the precision of control and the rewriting of the rules themselves. Rimuru, golden eyes steady, aura calm. Threads of influence extending endlessly, is now the uncontested Demon King, a ruler whose authority cannot be challenged by conventional power. As the battlefield settles completely, a calm descends over the land. The chaotic storm of heaven and hell has been absorbed, neutralized, and integrated into Rimuru's system. The sun, filtered through lingering clouds, casts a soft light over Britannia, illuminating the new era. Even the rivers sparkle with residual magic now aligned under his influence. The sins gather around, observing silently, understanding that the world has changed forever. Rimuru does not speak. His presence communicates supremacy, stability, and absolute authority. Britannia is his to guide, protect, and reshape according to the network of control he now commands. And so Rimuru stands alone at the center of the realm he has irrevocably rewritten. Golden eyes calm, aura steady, threads of influence extending across every fragment of power, every force, and every corner of Britannia. The Demon King's authority has been neutralized, heaven's law adapted, and the battlefield transformed into a cohesive, harmonious ecosystem under Rimuru's control. Britannia has entered a new era, and its new Demon King watches silently, ready to guide a realm where power, law, and authority serve not domination, but structured balance. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this multiverse showdown, hit like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which universe you'd like Rimuru to conquer next. The multiverse is vast, and the possibilities are endless.